What is up, friends? I know it's been a while, but we are back for another episode of the Raptors 2K podcast presented by our friends at UberEats. Episode number 20. It's been quite the journey. Shane, I know you've been on a bit of a journey yourself. We haven't talked in a while, but I know you've been up to some big things. And I'm not just talking about dodging those wildfires going on in Canada. Glad to see you're okay, by the way. But why don't you let everybody know what you've been up to, man? I know you got some exciting news to share.
Yeah, well, we couldn't record, or it was my fault. We didn't record last month. We got married, and then actually went out your
Woo!
way, Phil, for a honeymoon. Did California for honeymoon, which is not where I thought I would do my honeymoon, to be honest with you. Definitely like Greece and in Italy were, on the top of the list. But
How'd you end
my
up in
wife,
California?
I know it's weird because I've been there so many times for work, but I will say it was amazing, and it was a totally different side of California. When you're flying in and out for work, it's a little bit of a different experience. So I got like the quintessential California experience. We did West Hollywood, went shopping on Rodeo Drive, and just like a beautiful day, and
Okay.
splurged a little bit, and then ended up down in Laguna at an incredible hotel. Just had like my best hotel experience of my life down there. And
Love it.
yeah, my wife, she always wanted to do LA. Our whole relationship, she's like, one day we should go to LA. And I kept thinking for sure, like you should tag along on a work trip at some point. But honestly, things are really busy with AMP, and it was not the right time for me to go over to the time, either Greece or Italy, but just that time zone, generally speaking, for any
Yep.
extended period. So the fact that she was like, "Hey, why don't we just do California?" Was perfect because I was able to kind of stay connected to what was going on, at AMP from my phone. I got a great team in place, so they took a lot of the heavy lifting off my shoulders. But it meant that we got to have a great trip, and I got to stay, close enough to AMP, so I didn't have to fully disconnect, which is just again not something I can do right now because things are moving in our world. But it was an amazing experience. Thanks for asking, and sorry that we weren't able to record a podcast because of it.
Hey man, you got nothing to apologize. I'm happy for you, bro. Like that is a life step in the right direction. And shouts to you and the missus for doing it big. It's always good to hear that. Nothing really crazy on my end. I'll be honest with you. Like you're praising California. I'm over here hating it because this June gloom continues because it has just been a cloudy fiesta like for the last like 2 weeks, from best I can tell. Like every now and then the sun will kind of peek its head out there and try and make an impression, but it's been very inconsistent. But
Well, admittedly, I
um,
didn't do my research. I had no idea about May gray and June gloom,
mhm.
and everywhere we went, people were telling us. But we got really lucky. Like the clouds broke, and we got sun at exactly the right moments. We spent a couple days in Santa Monica, which was basically overcast, rainy the whole time. But we were kind of just hopping from like extravagant restaurant to extravagant restaurant, so it didn't really affect the experience that much. We did a cool little e-bike ride down to Venice, but when we got to Laguna,
Oh, that's
sitting
nice.
poolside, clouds broke, just pure sunshine. It was beautiful. Went out whale watching, same thing. Clouds broke right when we were out on the boat, so it worked out really well.
Wow.
Felt like
That
karma was on our side.
I was gonna say, man, definitely you definitely picked the right time and the weather cooperating, always good to hear. But super glad to have you back, man. This is going to be really kind of a little bit of a send-off episode since we're gonna be leaving it at 20 episodes. The last 2 years have been a lot of fun. I know the team has some other things that they've been working on and they're excited to share with the fans in regards to Uber. So I think Uber Eats, I think it's gonna be awesome for sure. I'm looking forward to hearing about it. We're gonna go out with a bang. So we bought out a guest. Pretty awesome. Someone you have a bit of a history with too, Shane, if I'm not
Yeah, for sure.
mistaken.
One
Those are
on one,
always the best
Chris.
ones. There you go. Those are always the
One on
best
one,
ones. So
Chris
who
on
wants to
Twitter.
pop up? That would be awesome. Let's bring him into the show. Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
What's up, everyone? I feel kind of like this is super special to be on the send off episode. So I appreciate you guys thinking of me, and thanks to you, Shane. It's nice to get a chance to talk to you again. It's nice to meet you, Phil. So thank you very much to you guys, and Raptors GC and Uber Eats for having me on.
Yeah, man, it's great to reconnect with you. It's been a minute. I can't wait to catch up on what you've been up to because, I was very much there witness to you breaking into the league. And, you were one of those examples that I would, tell people about you, Josiah Cohen, a couple others who just did it right, spotted an opportunity. A lot of people kind of in the beginning of the league and when I was in my role with the Raptors, like people hit you up all the time with a DM just sort of like asking for something, hey, I want to get into this, can I get a job? And I told them the same thing, like there's so much opportunity to just do stuff, just get started. You don't need anything but a Twitter account to start creating content, putting opinions out there, scouting players, etc. And I'll say 90% of those people, I never heard from them again, never saw anything from them on Twitter. But you're an example of someone who did it the right way, just started going and creating content and putting your opinions out there and analyzing plays. And, now it's led to this. And we're going to tell the listeners all about where that's led you to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think like a big part of it is just trying to overcome that fear of putting something out and then either it not being received well, or worst case scenario not being received or seen by anyone at all, or
Yep.
being told that it was wrong, or just doing it solely because you want it to lead to some kind of opportunity. I think that's like the worst way to go about it. And so fortunately for me, I just, A, I love the game of basketball, B, I just am so passionate about 2K. So how I approached it was, I knew I would like to kind of end up in a spot and work in the 2K space and work in the esports space, but I just approached it like, hey, I'm just going to do this for fun. I live in Toronto. There's a Raptors uprising gaming team. I'm going to do content around them. I tried to, you mentioned Josiah, who played such an instrumental role in me kind of entering the scene and the space and getting familiar with the ins and outs and the people that make up the community. But just kind of doing it just for the love of it, I think it put me on at least your radar and Raptors GC's radar, and one thing led to another. I was kind of doing my own thing with podcasts and content on YouTube, and then of course I did stuff with Dimer and Josiah, and then before I knew it, I was getting an email from Kevin Franklin, and then the rest is kind of history. I ended up doing stuff with Raptors GC, and fast forward today, and the 2K League is basically my life, and it kind of takes up my daily routine.
Yeah, and your content was always great too. And as everyone who just heard that can already tell, you're great on camera, really good communicator. But it's true. I just scrambled and Googled, and turns out it's an Aristotle quote. But there's a quote that I think is relevant to what you were saying, which is like, there's only one way to avoid criticism: do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. And that's true, man. Like, I have the keys to the AMP socials, and man, do you get some criticism. It's like, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, everyone's got an opinion on the captions. And I think we all suffer from a little bit of main character syndrome. And you think, just because someone says something, now you feel like they're really targeting you. But the reality is these are just people who like to spew, angry tweets on the internet, and they're on to the next one. It's like, you think that people are focused on you, but they're really just lost in their own thoughts. And they're probably, people like that in particular are probably off criticizing someone else elsewhere on Twitter. So it really is noise that you just have to like not worry about. I pay attention to it because sometimes there's insight within it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're seeing a consistent message, it's like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this and we need to review it. But generally speaking, yeah, I think you get a little numb to it once you've received enough of it. And it's unfortunate because you want to have that experience of having received enough criticism to be numb to it in the beginning when it affects you the most, right? Like, that's when it's most important that you can do that. And that's when it's hardest to avoid it, or to not let it bother you, I should say. But anyway, great to see that, you didn't let it slow you down at all. And, obviously now doing great stuff. So what's your current role with Nets GC?
Hold on, before you answer that.
Yeah, go,
before
Phil.
You answer that,
Go for it, Phil.
Before you answer that, I'm a victim of criticism myself. For 19 episodes, I've been criticized why my food never arrives before this man. I ordered before we started, so I am assuming that I'm actually going to beat him. Now, what are you getting, Shane? I'm gonna give you a chance to catch up, but
Good
I need
call.
this
And shout out UberEats for all the meals, and shout out UberEats for the 20 episodes of the pod here. It was great getting to know my guy Phil better, and we had some really fun interviews over the last 2 years. So appreciate the opportunity. Okay, I know what I'm doing. So there is a bakery, like the town over. I drive there from time to time, but I just actually realized that they're also on UberEats, which is fantastic because it's a little bit of a drive away. So one of the perks of delivering through UberEats, shout out UberEats, and I'm gonna get a mortadella and mozzarella sandwich. It's like the simplest sandwiches. It's just focaccia bread, a little oil, mortadella, and then this house-made mozzarella. It's so simple but so perfect. It's absolutely what I'm craving right now.
Damn, that
what did you
good.
get, Phil?
I just got 3 fish tacos.
Phil's off. How many of your meals in a week are fish, do you think?
I would say at least 3. At least 3 or 4.
Okay, see,
Yeah,
I
I'm a
think you're
big fish
batting like
guy.
90% on the podcast, so I would have guessed actually more than that, to be honest with you. But hey, it's
I think
healthy. It's smart.
it is. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. But we'll
My
see
problem
what
is
ends up
fish doesn't
happening
do it
with
for
that on
me.
Sunday.
I love
Really?
tuna and I like sushi, like, but even when I get sushi, it's usually just like different types of tuna that I get. Like
Mm.
I'll get some sashimi and I'll get some spicy tuna rolls and stuff like that, and then all the fixins on the side that come with sushi. But yeah, I'm not a huge fish guy.
You gotta get that yellowtail, man. You gotta get some catfish. You gotta get some cod. You gotta expand your horizons, my
I
G.
know.
Trust me,
Well,
it is worth it.
and yellowtail I do like any kind of whitefish. It's the salmon that I can't do. I don't like the pink. I used to wake up and my mom would be like cooking salmon in the morning, and the house smelled so fishy that it just completely turned me off. And it's one of those things that like scarred me as a kid, and to this day I can't eat salmon.
That's
What about you?
reasonable.
What about you, Chris? You a fish guy? We're asking the
uh,
hard hitting questions here on the 20th episode of the Raptors 2K podcast. At some point, we're
it's
going to start talking about 2K, folks.
it's so weird because there and me and my girlfriend are still trying to narrow this down via trial and error, and I'm sure there's a lot of healthier ways to kind of go about this, but sometimes I get an allergic reaction to fish, and then
Mm.
there are other times where when I don't, and we've through trial and error we've tried same types of fish, and sometimes I'll have that reaction, sometimes I won't. So it's I don't know, it's really weird. But since moving to Toronto, because I used to live in Peterborough prior to this,
Oh, my
out in the
girl's from
Kawartha,
Peterborough too.
yeah, out in the Kawarthas, and then since moving to Toronto, out in Peterborough, as great as it was, not really, the most. A lot of good places to eat, but not as many options, not as diverse as
Sure.
downtown Toronto. And so Uber Eats definitely makes it possible for me to kind of be a bit more adventurous. So this is like a half hybrid 2K show, half food show that
Yeah,
is
it's an everything show. We
definitely
bullshit
surprising
a
me.
lot. Yeah.
A lot, yes. Right.
We started the pod off giving a lot of career advice, and honestly, that's why I like talking to people like you, whom I saw, carve away into the 2K League, and even now as I pay attention on Twitter, there's these new voices and faces and talent and pundits and whatever you want to call them who weren't around when I was there, and others have
Mhm.
moved on, like myself. And I love seeing that people are looking at folks like you and Josiah as like a prototype and following in that path and starting to carve out lanes, because one of the best things about the 2K League is it's such a big ecosystem, considering the game itself is not huge, as an esport, but with all the teams and all the franchises and all the resources pumped into it from the NBA parent clubs, it creates an incredible amount of opportunity. And obviously, we're going through an esports winter. Phil and I have talked about that a couple times on the podcast here.
Yeah.
But the 2K League is well resourced, and it's just like this really interesting, little ecosystem within the broader esports space that is right now at least shielded from what feels like, again, a bit of a downturn for the industry overall. And that's why I've
Mhm.
always been long on the 2K League. Again, league game didn't explode the way that some other game titles have, but I think it's going to win the long game. It's got such a runway ahead of it that I think that they're going to be able to sustain through this. And I don't think anybody has any question that there's always going to be an interest in watching people play video games at the highest level. And I think it's only going to get stronger. Obviously, I think things got a little blown out of proportion over the last few years, and now we're kind of settling back into normal. What they call a bubble, right?
Mhm.
But I've always believed that the 2K League has so much potential because of the runway ahead of it. Speaking of, the league is wrapping up the tip-off tournament.
Yes.
So, as everyone knows, it was 5-on-5 my whole time in the league, and then last year they introduced 3v3. But last year they were going back and forth, 5v5, 3v3, 5v5, 3v3.
Yep.
This year they separated the two. They got all the 3v3 done, and now they're into the 5-on-5, the 5v5. So that's why we're mid-June, and the tip-off tournament is happening tonight because it's technically the first tournament of 5v5 play. Chris, one question for you. This isn't from our notes here, but just off the top of my head, did you get a sense for the fact that there was like a real push from the players and community to separate the 5-on-5 and 3v3 versus going back and forth? And do you think that was the right call?
Um, I can kind of really speak to what was happening internally with Nets GC, and I do know just based off, players are esports players especially, and of course athletes as well in IRL sports are
Mhm.
very routine oriented, and they have their habits, and if some players, if you throw them off their routine, it can really, send them into a downward spiral. And so last year when we were alternating between 3v3 and 5v5, one of the challenges, at least for us over at NetsGC, was being able to kind of find a rhythm and build on momentum. And if you were to come off a buzzer beating loss, especially if you're hyper and uber competitive, all you really want to do is get back into the lab and try and get back to the drawing board and figure things out right away and be able to play the next day. And there were times where that was happening in 3v3. We would get knocked out, but then we would have to just forget about everything to a degree, and then lock in for fives. And I think that kind of changed our routine in a way that was challenging in some ways. And so we were very much looking forward to how this format was, where everything is, there's pros and cons to everything, but we would play 3v3 out in its entirety first, and then we would move on to 5v5. And I guess really as great as this format is, I guess now a new challenge is that, yes, the games, they mean a lot, but it feels like the season is over in a blink of an eye. And there's not
Mm,
really that time that
Mm,
we had in the earlier seasons to kind of figure things out. We don't necessarily have that anymore. So,
right.
you play 6 group games, and then before you know it, we're pretty much halfway through our season. We've only got the turn now, because after the turn, we hop into our play-in tournaments, the ticket, and then it's playoffs. And so there are challenges that come with that, but I do personally, for me, I do like being able to lock in on one game mode at a time and then figure it out. I really like the group play format. I think we could maybe in the future, how we distribute points towards the standings in the playoff race, maybe put a little bit more of an emphasis on land play and wins on land. But I really do enjoy the structure that the 2K League is using in the format that we're using this year. I'm a big fan of the Call of Duty League. Champs is happening this weekend, and it's quickly starting to mirror what their format looks like. With remote group plays and land plays and these, quote unquote majors. But the games feel important, so that's good from a viewer perspective. But
hmm
there are pros and cons to everything.
It's interesting. I was just thinking while you were saying that, is there any other esport where the pros have to play the same game but in different modes and that play so differently? Like Phil, like none of the titles I've ever been in, I can think of. And I don't know if that's the case in any of the fighting games or any scenes
No,
that I'm
I
not
mean
familiar with, but it's kind of
everything
unprecedented.
pilots this. Yeah, everything pilots the same. From online to LAN. I mean, the only thing you kind of have to account for is like maybe some lag at some points, depending on your connectivity issues. But
hmm
nah, like that's why like my first season. When I was talking to Dirk and he was explaining like, yeah, retail because we played a little bit of retail. He was like, yeah, but the league build is going to be different. I was like, what do you mean? It's the same game. No, no, it was not. It was in fact not the same game. So it was pretty comical to see like people have to kind of adjust to that. You know what I mean? Like to try and mirror maybe the same success that they have on retail versus the league build, which I think is interesting because it really kind of it tests your ability to kind of adapt to a new system on the fly. But it is worth it because the prize pools are so crazy, which you can really get out of it.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think no matter what happens, it's safe to say that what the 2K League looks like, 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now will be entirely different than what it is now. I mean, going from
Hmm.
season 1 to season 6, it's already so vastly different. I think the
hmm
Yeah.
2K, the retail game, it's a double-edged sword because there are so many game modes that make up NBA 2K every single year, and the community is fractured into like different
hmm
game modes and what they want to create content around and what they think is more entertaining or what they think is more competitive. And so the challenge that the league has, and I think we'll eventually be able to kind of figure out how to best attack this, is how can we incorporate all those different distinct communities into one competitive scene, because overall the NBA 2K community is huge. It's just that there's
hmm
Yep.
just these different funnels and pathways that we need to try and figure out like how to best leverage this.
Yeah, and it's funny because and I think I was probably getting a like biased, stream of information given what I was doing with the Raptors, but it seemed to me, at least the first few seasons that really, if we had been able to give the retail players the 2K League build, that's kind of what everyone wanted.
Hmm. Hmm.
Everyone wanted this like really balanced, no exploits, no OP builds or what's the term I'm looking for? Like dribble moves. What do you call it when you apply? What's the general term for like a skill move that you can add to your
Oh,
build?
like SIGs, like the signatures, like the dribble SIGs, and
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, there's a term that's escaping me right now. But point being, that's what it felt like. And then I started learning about stage, and I was like, oh, there's this other version of the game which is actually way more popular on Twitch, and it's way more arcadey, and it's got this like, it's
Mhm.
faster and it's crazy dribble moves, and I was like, I get it. Like maybe not everybody does want to play 5-on-5 really balanced 2K. And I think the biggest challenge that I saw with bringing the 2K retail mode was the difference in the roles, right? Like, you have to specialize at power forward, right? And when you're, just some kid coming home after school, it's like, do you really want to play most of the game in the corner, kind of like waiting for your moments? Like, and it's such an important position because you need to know positionally how to move, right? How to rotate, how to play defense, etc. But really, one of the skills of a power forward is just being one of those people who's ready and doesn't feel the pressure of the fact that they haven't taken a shot in a quarter, and now all of a sudden, big play, ball lands in their hands, and they got to pull up and hit a green, right? Like that's always been one of the skills to me of a power forward. And when we had Jake Knapp on the team, like that's what always like impressed me. Or this kid just had like ice in his veins for someone who was a rookie and who had no experience playing in the 2K league, obviously as a rookie, is what I was saying, but more so his age. He was so young; he had just become, age eligible for the league, and he was playing that role for us. And he just always seemed to deliver. When the lights were brightest, he was just ready to pull up and shoot when we hit him with it. But I can also understand the challenges that would face that would create when trying to play a game with your friends after school, right? Like you got 5 buddies, you're all going to log on. Okay, who's playing power forward, right? Like who's
Mhm.
specializing in these particular roles? Everybody wants to be the point guard, or
Right.
center,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's
so.
the glamorous position. I think one thing that I'm really excited about with the league though is that it's becoming more diverse in terms of what is being asked of the positions on the floor. We look back
Mm,
season 1 and season 2, maybe the power forward is looked down upon a little bit more than it is now. At power forward, you just have so many responsibilities. You're basically like the point guard as the back end trying to guard the
mhm.
PNR. And there's a little bit more variety in terms of how teams approach their offense. But yeah, no, it's a intriguing like challenge for the 2K league and 2K in general. I think for just kind of bridge that connection between the retail community and the pro league. I think the big thing is a lot of casual fans, they watch a game of the NBA 2K league and they're like, "Oh no, he missed that shot. He wasn't able to green that open. I can do that. Oh, like that wasn't so difficult. I don't
Mhm.
understand what the big deal is." And so, I
Hmm.
mean, you guys know this best. The tutorial videos and the tutorial content that Raptors GC puts out, it tracks very, very well. And we're seeing similar things over on Nets GC, and it's being able to kind of inform and educate people. And I think Shane, you really nailed it on the head. Trying to integrate some kind of league content or ranked mode in NBA 2K would be
Mhm.
ideal in trying to have that like connective tissue between casual fans, the casual viewer, and the 2K league. Because when I watch the Call of Duty league, I know, oh, he just turned on him with a sniper. I cannot do that, and so game respects
Appreciate
game,
it.
and
Yeah, yeah.
I wanna keep watching this. I wanna
There's a
keep
measuring
uh,
stick. Yeah.
exactly admiring
Yeah.
this for what it is, and so I think that's the next big step. It's definitely possible, but baby steps.
Well, it wouldn't be a 2K podcast if I didn't not let Phil ask any questions, but or have any insights after answers. So I'm going to suck the air out of the room one more time here. Uh, One of the things that dawned on me, going back to what I had said previously, was if we could figure out a way to get this like archetype-driven build into retail, that would probably reduce some of those barriers to having a friend who specializes in power forward, because you don't have to grind a my player up and build. You can just like, okay, next game I'm just going to pick the power forward archetype. Let's see, maybe this is the best formation for our group to win, and so that would help. Obviously, you got to figure out the business model behind it, right? Because my
Hmm.
player is how they generate so much revenue for the game, and so that's a huge challenge to navigate. But to your point, in like a ranked mode, I always thought it would be really cool if once you got to a certain level in one of the other modes of the game, you sort of unlocked this 2K League version where it was archetype based. It was always 5-on-5, and I even thought perhaps maybe it was only solo queue. And if it was only solo queue, then it would be really balanced. It would be it would be role queue, obviously, kind of like Overwatch does. But um, I think you almost might have to create like ranked game windows or something just to funnel like a smaller player base to the queue at the same time, because it would be like a role queue. But what would be amazing is if that created like a draft board, and your stats from ranked play were what got you into the draft pool, for instance, or was one of the paths into the draft pool, right? Because obviously, I think the local tournament model is working well. But I would love to see a path from the retail game into the draft. And I think, in season one, while maybe it was a little dysfunctional, building the plane on the way up, the fact that it was really just a path from retail into the draft created an incredible amount of demand. There was like, I think the number was like 72,000 people who went through that process, and
It was
that's
nuts then.
yeah, and all those people become an audience, right? Like you said, if you have played in a fair, balanced game and you've learned, I'm not as good as I thought I was. I'm really good, but the 0.01% are ranks above me in this ranked game. Now I'm going to tune in and watch. Because when you're watching pros play pros, and especially when it's on a slightly different version of the game than retail, it is hard to appreciate how good that they are. Even when I watch Counter-Strike, I'm like, I could hang in this server, and then you get into Face It and you're playing against players who would get mopped by the guys you're watching, and they're mopping you. It's like there's just not, it's not the case. But I think esports, even more than traditional sports, is that thing where like when you're observing, you're like that armchair analyst, you feel like you're just a little away from being as good as these pros are, but it's not the
Yeah,
case at all.
I'm victim to that delusion as well. And it's not even just, yeah, okay, these guys are better than me. I'm gonna continue to watch, or I'm gonna watch more. It's also, okay, these guys are better than me. How can I get to that level? Like what do I need? What kind of content do I need to watch? What teams do I want to follow? Who do I want to become a fan of? Whose stream am I gonna watch so I can learn all the little things they're doing with their dribble moves, their jump
Mm-hmm.
shots. How do they approach the game? How do they look and attack a certain situation in a set? Those are all things that I kind of want to learn. That way, I may not end up being a pro, but I'm going to be better than my buddies in the group chat, right? So it's just like a trickle down effect. But the gateway will always be with retail and trying to figure that out. And I love the rank mode windows and unlocking it, even if it starts as a paid DLC and we evolve it from there. I think
Exactly.
that's where we start really cooking with gas. So it's an exciting thought.
Yeah, I think the paid DLC model could work too.
I agree. Do you find it difficult to kind of do like your operations job like remotely? Like, is that like a
That's a very
challenge or
that's
like?
a very good question. It's so funny when people ask because um I think I've mentioned this to Kev before. I definitely have, talked to Kurt about this over at SGC. For those who aren't familiar, he's the general manager and head coach for
OG.
Nets
Yes,
Gaming
sir.
Crew. But Liberty Village is actually home to two 2K League franchises, and that is, Raptors GC and Nets GC. So there are definitely challenges that come with it, but I've been so lucky. To have earned the trust of everyone over at Brooklyn Sports Entertainment, in that they've given me this role where I'm able to put together concepts both on the marketing side of things, business side of things, and basketball operations side of things, all the way over here from Toronto. And then, of course, I've been so lucky and fortunate that they'll fly me out to New York, every month, and I'll come for the playoffs. Last year in Indy, this year in DC. So yes, there are challenges. I'd prefer to be in the room with the guys on the ground
Yeah.
floor every single day. Sometimes the Zoom meetings, there's a little bit of a that like in-person presence that I lack, that I desperately want, but
Mm-hmm.
it makes it's all made up for when I actually do visit everyone in New York. I'm able to hang out with them in person. It makes it that much more special. But yeah, it can get tricky operating or helping operate Nets GC all the way over here from Toronto.
Good for you though, man. That's
Fair enough.
awesome. Um, Couple questions for you. Well, I guess so. There, the tip-off semis tonight. What are your predictions? And this is going to come out after the fact, so the listeners will know whether you were right or wrong.
That's
Think hard.
that's a no, 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 no. It was a little bit shocking to kind of see Warriors Gaming Squad exit the tournament last night.
Shout out
But
Kenny.
Yeah, shout out
I've,
Kenny.
I've been excited. I've been excited. I haven't caught any games, but I've been seeing the stats and player of the week noms and stuff like that, and so happy for my guy. I love seeing him continue to show these young kids that he's got it. He's
Yeah,
always
no,
been
for
him.
sure.
I wish
Yeah,
they
he's
had it
a
last night. I was rooting for him. Damn,
Were you?
Grizz.
Yeah.
He's a Raptors uprising legend, and when I first started doing content work for Shane and for the Raptors, Kenny was going through his MVP season in season 3, the undefeated stretch, and so Kenny always has kind of a special place in the beginning of my work in the space. So to see him flourish at this new lock position, it's really no surprise. I think you
Yeah.
can kind of transition from guard, especially if you have all the skill and talent in the world. So it's fun. It was fun to see him kind of play well early here, not just in 3v, like not just in 5v5, but in 3v3 as well. And then you've got Nay, who's from Canada, as well as on the Warriors at center. So I can see why you're a big fan of them, Shane. But yeah, unfortunately, and then Josiah as well, the Josiah connection. But
Yep.
unfortunately, they dropped out. I'm like Kurt knows I'm so competitive. Once Nets GC is out, I hope every team loses. Like if there was a way for
You don't want
everyone
anyone
to
to win.
lose, yeah, I'd prefer that scenario. For the
So you're
Raptors,
not going to gas anyone, is what you're saying.
I hope you guys win every game except against us. Is has always been my belief. But what I'm most excited about though is the distinct. This has always been prevalent in like IRL sports and in the NBA, I'd say not so much now, but before, where the conferences have distinct personalities. And you see so far, at least in 5v5 on the Western Conference, it's very high paced, run and gun, high shot volume, lots of threes, and the score is very much inflated. And then in the
Makes
East,
sense why
some of the
Kenny's doing
best.
well then, because that was always his game. Full court press, running gun,
Exactly.
lots of transition points. Yeah, makes
Yeah, and then
sense.
just increasing the amount of increasing the amount of possessions and increasing,
Hmm.
reducing variance by increasing the amount of possessions. I'm sure, Josiah knows all about that. But then in the East, some of the better teams, and you're starting to see it kind of trail off. This pattern has been a little bit less prevalent now that they've gone deeper into the tournament. Teams are trying to figure out their offensive identity. But take a team like NBL, for example. They're the complete opposite side of the scale, where they're very slow pace. They're very defensive oriented. And so I'd love to kind of see whoever it ends up being in the finals. I'd love to kind of see that clash of styles and that clash of philosophies and see what ends up winning. I'm sure from a viewer perspective, you want to see more points. You want to see, teams run it up. But from just like a coaching perspective and, from my perspective here at NetsGC, I'm curious to see what meta ends up coming out on top, because it's very much a copycat league and you want to be able to kind of see early on. If you're not going to partake in the tournament, you kind of want to extract relevant and valuable data from it. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. If I had to put, if I'm
You
not going
have
to sit
to.
on the
You
fence
have
here,
to pick a winner.
if I'm gonna put a
Someone's got
winner
to
on it,
win.
yeah, if I'm gonna put a winner on it, I'm gonna go with Minnesota for now. I just like they toy around with the 5-out, which I'm so happy that they're doing. I don't know why there's such a resistance from at least the North American 2K Pro M community towards 5-out. You'll see these crazy tweets where it's, oh, that's not real ball. They don't play real ball, or this team plays real ball.
Yeah.
But I'm glad the T-Wolves are toying around with it and seeing some success. I think, again, from a viewer perspective, the more variety, the more distinct offensive personalities that we have. If we can get to a point in the 2K League where teams have a distinct style of play, even if it's not permanent, I think that's just better for the league in general. So to see the T-Wolves do that and for them to kind of capture a banner playing 5-out, I think will result in more variety. So I'm rooting for them. And then that backcourt with Bear and Shifty Kai, no matter what you want to slow them down, but they'll always kind of find a way to pop off for like 30, 40 points and run up the scoreboard. So yeah, I'm my heart says, okay, I'd like the T-Wolves to win just for what the end result may be, big picture wise.
Right. It was always good when those guys won too, because they're such personalities. You want to see
Oh,
Bear
yeah. Bear's
talking
crazy.
his shit.
Yeah, exactly.
After a win, it just creates great content.
Yeah, you know what? Finally, though, my roommate slyly just dropped this off. I have won. My UberEats has arrived first.
It only took
For
20
change.
episodes It only took 20,
Congrats.
but Phil finally got
And a
the
head
priority
start, bro.
delivery. See, what I didn't
Yes.
tell Phil is I've been paying, and I advise you all to pay the priority delivery every time. So I was guaranteed to get my meal first every
So I
episode
never had
leading
a
up to that.
chance.
You never had a chance. But this time, Phil was sneaky and he ordered it ahead of time. And Phil, congratulations. It's been an
Wow.
honor doing this with you for the last 2 years. It's an honor having Chris on our last episode here. Chris, we don't have to wrap
Absolutely.
just yet. Just because his food's arrived, we can kind of round out. I wanted to ask you how the Nets season's gone so far. And what you think about the team, and where you guys are at and what you need to do going forward as just kind of like a closing question,
Yeah, for
since you're here
sure.
representing the Nets.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like from the operation side of things, I started kind of like, as you know, Shane, I joined as a team writer, and
Mm-hmm.
then in my second season with the team, entering season 5, I was lucky enough to have Kurt, give me responsibilities um, from the operation side, and so the last 2 years, the entire window has been so interesting because the way we've constructed our roster, we've had to overcome some challenges that have been self-inflicted by our team, our organization, and our players. But we wanted to kind of establish a new identity moving forward that just hasn't started with this year, and so that's why I backtracked to season 5. But we wanted to build a team that was on the same page collectively. Enjoy doing content. We're good people on and
Hmm.
off the sticks. Shared some of the
Critical,
values
man.
that shared some of the values that BSE had, and also wanted, to win at all costs. And
Yeah.
so we started that last season, bringing on Streets and Stees and trying to develop some sort of defensive identity. And then, of course, the second part of that was trying to figure out our backcourt identity and our personality. And fortunate enough, we were able to kind of luck out in the lottery. We didn't get the number 1 pick, but we ended up with the second, and we were able to bring home Greens, or keep Greens home, is a better way to put it, and have a Brooklyn
Oh, he's
kid
from Brooklyn?
represent. Yeah,
Nice.
exactly.
That's awesome.
Have a Brooklyn kid represent, Nets GC, and he has all the talent in the world. And we were like, I'm not afraid to admit, we were and our players have been very public about this. We were so excited for the 5v5 season. We were not nearly as excited for the 3v3 season, but the nature of the game is expect the unexpected. And what ended up happening was we found out somewhere along the way we were actually good at threes, and so the amount of we were balancing 3s and 5 scrimmages earlier in the year, and suddenly, once it dawned on us that we had a chance to win a 3v3 championship, that 5 scrimmages, the volume just quickly decreased, and we were just locked in on threes. And before we knew it, we were playing on championship Saturday. We finished third. And the guys were able to take home some money for their family. We were able to win the organization some money as well. But here we are in 5s now, the mode that we were so excited to play. We were chomping at the
Yep.
bit, and it ended up being, the 5v5 tournament, the tip-off ended up being the first time we missed out on stage play in DC. So it's weird, the 2K League will throw you in for a loop. But where we are right now is just trying to kind of reset. We have been keeping a close eye on figuring out all the things that kind of work, what the top teams are doing, what we feel like we could improve on in terms of what the top teams are doing, and then also trying to stabilize the identity that we've created so far in terms of like being a really good defensive team, and, getting out on the break a little bit better. But no, we want this tip-off tournament to end. We honestly don't care who wins.
On to the
We're
next.
excited. Yeah, we're excited for the turn. It's the beauty about this league. I talked, down on it in terms of like earlier in this podcast where I said that um, in the blink of an eye, it seems like the season is over. But on the flip side, the good side of that is that we're able to kind of bounce back a little bit quicker because we don't really get a break in between the tip off and the turn. So we'll have a chance to redeem ourselves. It starts next week, with our new group. Toronto and Brooklyn will once again avoid each other in group play this
Okay.
year. So if any matchup ends up happening, you'll have to wait for at least the bracket round of the turn.
Well, I hope you win every
So
game until we play you.
likewise, Shane. Likewise,
Yeah.
Yeah.
of course. I wish you
Well, I
guys
love that
all the
strategy to
success in
team
the world.
building. I love that strategy to team building. I've always said it. I think in this league, like, you over-index on skill sometimes, but at the end of the day, if you don't have 5 guys who are getting along, whose heads are in the right place, who can deal with the adversity, you're cooked. I don't think anybody, when the lights are bright, plays as good as they do in practice. And so you're looking for those level-headed guys who have good chemistry, who can deal with, whoever plays closest to their practice potential on game day, I think can win, and on any given day, a team can win in the 2K League based on that. And I think the best teams gel and peak at the end of the season. And we've seen that from time and time again, where teams come in relatively low seeds in the playoffs and then go on runs, toward championships because they click at the right time, because they were able to work through it. And where teams that weren't built that way start to implode because of the baggage of living together and practicing together and playing 2K every day. And the teams that are on the same page only get better as the season goes on. Glad to hear that that's what you guys are building your team around, because I think that that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, no,
Chris,
for
man,
sure. It's
such a pleasure. Congrats on everything. Love seeing good people, get to accomplish their objectives and their dreams, and it seems like you're well on your way. So it's a pleasure chatting with you again, man. Wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. It was a blast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't think we could have had a better guest for the closeout episode of the podcast, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Last 2 years have been amazing. Got to give a big shout out to Shane for obviously, let me be his co-pilot here. All the amazing guests we've had. UberEats, of course, for allowing this to even be a possibility. And the awesome behind-the-scenes staff at the Raptors 2K studio.
Yeah, and anyone who tuned in, man. Everyone who tuned in, I know most of this is consumed through the clips that we put out on social, but appreciate all you people who listen to the full episodes, and it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you back someday in some new revised form of content. Phil.
Oh, for sure.
Pleasure, buddy.
And, it's been a pleasure, and stay tuned because they're cooking something else up, all right? You want to make sure you're a part of it. Appreciate everybody who watched, showed love, and we'll see you, I'm sure, inevitably on the next one. Take care, everybody.
Take care, guys.